Hey guys, it's Sam, and these are my favorite standalones. So I read primarily science fiction and fantasy. These are primarily science fiction and fantasy books. I mean, I think they're almost like all fantasy books. And what I discovered when making this list is I like a lot of standalones. Like most standalones I read end up becoming favorites. So most of these are going to be books that you've heard me talk about before at length, and you're not going to be surprised. So first off, we'll get some of the easy ones off the list. One, The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. This is my favorite book of all time. This follows a circus that only appears at night and only appears every once in a while, and it is following a couple of different timelines. One is of a boy who wants to get into the circus, and then one is sort of the building and the imagining of the circus and the magic around it and all of the things. And what is actually happening is that there is a magical competition happening inside the circus between one person who is more naturally gifted at magic and the other person who is trained in magic, and their mentors always set up students of theirs to be rivals and to have like a magical competition, and the Night Circus is that competition. I love this. I love everything about this. Every time I read it, I get something new out of it. It will continue to be a favorite of mine for all time. Also by the same author is The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. This is about a graduate student who discovers a book and is very entranced by it. He's like, oh, this work of fiction, and then reads a story in it that's from his own childhood, his own experience, and he realizes like he's in this story. So he wants to figure out how this is true, what's happening, and just gets pulled into this magical world of just like so much different magic, and there's like magic around the corner. It's kind of one of those books. And this book is truly stories within stories within stories. It's so good. It's so masterfully done, and I loved it. Then we have A Master of Djinn by P. Jelly Clark. And this some might argue that, oh, there's like novellas and short stories in the same world. This is still a standalone. This is a standalone novel. There are no other novels in this world as of the making of this video. And this book takes place in a magical Cairo around 1912 and follows a detective who is put on the case after there's a like mass murder of this cult that worships the man that basically ripped apart the veil between our world and the magical world. So there's this sort of like steampunky like element, magical element to this world. Like there's sort of like automaton type things, and then also other kinds of magic and stuff. And so she's put on this case to figure out like what happened, what's going on, all of that. And it's just like a very fast-paced mystery kind of detective story within this magical world. Then a book I've talked about at length, Thistlefoot by Jenna Rose Nethercott. This is a book that's following the descendants of Baba Yaga, like the magical witch in the woods Baba Yaga, and these two were a part of a traveling show of sort of like puppeteers, and something happened a while ago that made them estranged. These are two siblings who are now adults, and they each have some kind of magical ability, but you're not really sure at the beginning what it is. They inherit Baba Yaga's house, the house on chicken legs, and the brother strikes a deal with the sister of like, hey, I'll let you keep the house because she's like in love with this house if we go on tour with it, because he sort of like, you know, wants to sort of make money from the house, whatever. What they also don't know at the time is that there is a man chasing them who is essentially the personification of like hatred and evil. He's like this magical being kind of, and he also wants this house. So everything kind of goes from there. So we have part family drama, part this sort of like mystery getting away from the sky. And then we have scenes and chapters that are told in Thistlefoot, that's the name of the house, Thistlefoot's perspective of Baba Yaga, and it connects a lot to Jewish and Eastern European like folklore and also just like history and stuff. So it has a mix of Baba Yaga as a witch, but also Baba Yaga as a Jewish woman, and the interweaving of all that. So many layers to this. So magical. It's so good. Then I decided to only include one book by Ava Reid on here, even though all of her books at this point are standalones, and I've read all of them except for her newest one, Lady Macbeth, but I want to read that very soon. And the one I picked was Juniper and Thorn by Ava Reid. This is a horror-esque novel. Not horror-esque, it's horror. It's a Gothic horror, and is following a woman who is one of three sisters, and she is living in this town with her father, who is very abusive and oppressive, and they're not allowed out of their home. One night she sneaks out and she falls in love with this dancer, like ballerina man. But there's a lot going on. There's like monsters in their garden. There's magic, like magic is real. There's monsters in her garden. There's like all of this imagery that is very intense and like graphic and gory. And there's a lot of this like what's actually happening, what's real, what's not. There's a ton of triggers in this. But this is sort of like the what makes a monster story kind of thing. And again, family drama. So definitely check out the triggers in here because I can't even list all of them because there are so many. Like basically anything you can be triggered by is in this pretty short book. But really like thematically strong and just a horror book in the way of it's unsettling all the time, even in times that things are supposed to be fine. You have this deep sense of unease the entire time you read it. Another longtime favorite is Uprooted by Naomi Novik. This is following a woman who lives on the edge of a forest, and every 10 years or so, there is a picking of a woman to go and be sort of like sacrificed to the dragon, except for the dragon is not a dragon, it's a man. He is this wizard that kind of protects them from the woods because the woods are corrupted with some evil, and it's unknown why, and it's unknown why he wants a woman all the time. But he doesn't kill her, he eventually sends her back later, but she's forever changed and never wants to like stay in the village where she lived. So her best friend, Agnieszka's best friend, is supposed to be picked for this, but she ends up going instead. She ends up also figuring out that she has some magical ability as well. And so there's this figuring out like what's actually happening in the woods, ways to keep her friend safe, this kind of very minor but very amazing romance with this dragon man. He's not actually a dragon, they just call him the dragon. And just opposites attract kind of thing, and it's amazing and so good. And everything that I love about like corrupted forests, nature magic, all of that is present in this book. Then we have If We Were Villains by ML Rio. This is the only not speculative sci-fi fantasy book on this list. This is a literary fiction kind of story and like a dark academia. So it has magical feels to it, even though there is no magic. And this is following a set of, I think it's five friends, who are in college at this school that's a Shakespearean theater school. And they have this very tumultuous, very toxic friendship. And then one year, the year that they're doing all the Shakespearean tragedies and performing those, there is an accident and everything is sort of unraveling from there. So this is kind of, again, following a little bit like different timeline-y stuff, like what's happening, who done it kind of thing, and it's all very twisted. And I talk about this book a lot for anyone that's a theater nerd because these kids are so pretentious and they talk to each other in Shakespearean lines like all the time, and the ways that like art imitates life and life imitates art and all of that, it's just amazing. You don't have to love Shakespeare. I enjoy Shakespeare as anyone that was like having to study Shakespeare like in high school. I feel like if you're obsessed with Shakespeare, you like this even more. But yeah, this is so solid. Then we have Nettle and Bone by T. Kingfisher. This is the book that solidified my love of T. Kingfisher, and hopefully in 2025 I'll be able to read even more of her backlist. But this is following a woman who has to go on a quest in order to save her sister, who is in a very abusive relationship with this prince who already murdered one of her sisters, supposedly, she thinks. So she is wanting to release her sister from this man. And so she's going on this magical quest. So she has a bone dog, she has to recruit a grave witch, she has to, and that grave witch has a demon-possessed chicken, and also a reluctant fairy godmother, and I believe there's somebody else. There's like a knight, like a knight that has something attached to all this. So yeah, and they have to go on a quest. So it's like a little found family-ish, it's a little bit fairy tale quest, it's all of these like impossible odds and you have to do these magical things, and it's all in this like dark fairy tale sort of gothic, I would say like gothic fairy tale setting. There's high stakes, but also it feels cozy at times, and I love it. This is my favorite kind of like cozy story. When there's coziness with stakes and things can be kind of creepy. Then we have The Last Tale of the Flower Bride by Roshni Chokshi. This is following a person who has gotten married to the infamous Indigo. She is this woman who, this is a Blackbeard kind of reimagining, by the way. So this is a woman who's very mysterious, kind of gets everything she wants. Is there magical elements to her? Is there not? We don't know. It's kind of that, that magical realism, fabulism type story. And so you follow this character who doesn't even have a name, as I think they just call them spouse, maybe husband. I think it's a man, but I'm not even really sure in the way that it's talked about. Like, you're not even really supposed to overly identify with the narrator of that part of the timeline. And then you have flashbacks to her, Indigo, with her childhood best friend and talking about their relationship and their like toxicity with each other. And it's just this weaving, like the main character is really Indigo. And you're just kind of trying to figure out who is she, what has she done, does she have magic, does she not? Like all of this mystery surrounding her, and she has secrets and she's like, do not look into them, but they have to, and then everything kind of comes together in the end with the two timelines. So this is beautiful. This has that, I love that fabulism element of like, is it magic, is it not? There's also a like kind of sentient house vibe to this. There's a lot of mystery, very short and beautifully written. Then we have The Once and Future Witches by Alex E. Harrow. This is taking place around Salem and like the witch trials, but also tying in This is taking place in like a fantastical version of our world in which there is a new Salem, so there's this element of like witch trials and witchcraft and suffragette movement. And it's following three sisters who live in this area, and they each are kind of a representation of the maiden, mother, and crone aspects of witchcraft and how their different stories interweave and intersect. And also the ways in which witchcraft and like story and stuff stay alive through fairy tale. And yeah, so it's like, it's their story, it's a family story, it's a story about them and their relationships to each other, and the history of kind of like witchcraft and stuff, and witches as like a concept, and all those other things. So yeah, this is fantastic. This has some romantic elements in here that I really love. All of these characters are, again, archetypes of that maiden, mother, crone vibe that I really love. So if you know anything about witchiness, this is very classically witchy, and I loved it. Then we have an oldie but a goodie that I haven't talked about in a while, and that is The Golem and the Jinni by Helene Wecker. And this is taking place in New York City, I believe, I'm forgetting the exact timeline, I don't know if it's going to say. Yeah, like right around 1899 in New York. And there is a golem and there is a jinni, and we kind of find out how they both got to New York. These are two magical creatures from very different cultures, how they get to New York around that time. So it's really like a fantasy story, but also an immigration story. And so like they're living in different neighborhoods based on like their racial backgrounds and things, because golems are Jewish creatures. The jinni are usually like Muslim or Arabic creatures. It kind of depends on whatever like mythology, and they kind of like go into that and talk about that. And these two form kind of this like unlikely friendship, even being from two different cultures, but being like fish out of water in a new place. And the way that this is like done within that fantastical element is really cool and really beautiful. Then I decided to not talk about every single mythology retelling, even though most mythology retellings would fall into this category. I tend to like a lot of them, and a lot of them are standalones, but I think one of my favorites is Circe by Madeline Miller. This is a reimagining, a following of the Circe myth, Circe as a main character who pops up in the Odyssey by Homer. And we get an interweaving of other sort of Greek myth and things, and like her fully fleshed out story. And this is so beautiful, just about like womanhood and her being another classic like archetypal witch, and just fleshing out her story in a world where like her actual story was never told, because the story was never about her. And the final book, and another book in that same vein, is The Weaver and the Witch Queen by Genevieve Gornichek. This is following mythology and folklore around Viking Age history, and is following two women who grew up together and were best friends, and one just stayed in like a normal life, and the other one ended up having a lot of things happen and ended up becoming a witch, becoming like a sorceress, and their lives eventually intersect again, and they're having to kind of contend with some major things happening in history, and in like magic and things, and the interweaving of like actual history and magicalness, and these two friends who are basically each other's family, and all that was wonderful. There are many standalones that I really love, but I would mostly just continue talking about my favorite books and ones that you've heard about a lot, but these are the ones that probably make the top of the list for standalones. Comment down below, let me know some of your favorite standalones. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all guys soon. Bye.